All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Tuesday, November 19th. So let's play how overbought are we today? I'm just kidding. Actually, S&P actually finished down today. I guess depending on what you're looking at, but SPY finished down just 3 basis points, right? That's it. So basically a flat day. The Diamonds, if you look at the Dow, that actually was a little bit worse off. That was down 30 basis points. Remember, that's a price weighted index, so not nearly as diversified as the SPY or S&P. IWM was the outperformer of the day, was up 37 basis points. I'm going to talk a little bit more about IWM small caps in a second. And Qs did okay today. They were up about 15 basis points today. So all in all, I thought just a really another really good trading day. Certainly, things have momentum to them that are moving, and it's just been a little bit, I think, easier to find these. Right? I mean, I would love to say, hey, it's me doing this, and or it's option activity is giving us a really good, some really good signals. I think that it is. I think there's some names that option activity has been recently has been, just providing some good examples of where there is some short-term momentum, but it's also just doing your homework every night and just kind of going through some charts, and what I continue to see is this rolling bull market, which I think is pretty impressive. What was so here's my thoughts from earlier today. What I sent some members, but normally a few days a week I send out a midday video just on a couple charts of interest and what my thoughts are on the day. But yes, I said market is getting pretty overbought. The RSI, it did cool a little bit. I think it was 74 on S&P futures, right? RSI being down here on the bottom, relative strength index, right? Got to about 70, maybe 73. It's off a little bit from that. I think right now it's a 72, which is still very overbought. Again, I sound like a broken record here, but price has not lost the 5 period moving average. So there's really, other than getting overbought, there's no sell signal, I would say now, even though, market breadth is not as strong as it was a couple days ago. Some things, I'll go into sectors in just a minute, but I just wanted to share my thoughts from what I compiled earlier. And again, that I mentioned in yesterday's video, I have a little bit of protection on. So with the S&P not going anywhere today, it's kind of like a nice, warm and fuzzy blanket. I talked about that in the pre-market session. Basically having a little bit of protection on kind of lets me, kind of speculate a little bit more to the upside and playing some things. And meanwhile, if we do happen to move down, I've got a hedge in place. And always go back to what we do know. Right now with the VIX, under 13, VIX actually did increase on the day, but it's very cheap to buy insurance, right? They always say, you want to buy insurance when you're not when your house is on fire. When your house is on fire, then it's too late. So buying puts a couple, again, you don't have to put on a ton of this. Put on something really inexpensive, and a little bit out of the money, just in case we do get a negative headline. And that's kind of how I look at it, right? Is that it's really cheap to do that right now. So, and that's kind of keeping me in the game too on the long side. So again, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not giving out any advice or recommendations or anything like that. But we do know that that right now the VIX is cheap, which makes implied volatility for options very, very cheap, right? So yeah, so that is why I have some protection. We'll continue to scout out opportunities. Some that I've been doing are just day trades recently. But this continues to be a rolling bull market. A couple of the things that I mentioned, kind of doing homework at night, you'll find these setups. And a couple of the setups that I found last night were Visa and Mastercard. Both looking. What's nice about this, and we're finding these over and over, is that after a huge run up for both Visa and Mastercard, the charts look almost identical. But you have, basically since the middle of the summertime, you've had multiple months of consolidation, and now price is back above value, right? Which I use that to kind of gauge when something is getting out of a range, right? Just very easy, very simple. Same thing with MasterCard. That was the one that I played today. I actually took profits. I was in very short-term calls. I was in not this week's but next week's calls, and I took those off today, and I actually moved and went into some Visa and basically rolled that out and up. But I like the Visa chart a little bit better, and that actually saw a little bit of call activity today. So, this is pretty interesting. I think overall that we're just if you do your homework, you're going to continue to find new setups right now in this market, which again, I think is pretty cool all in all. So market breadth, I mentioned I would talk a little bit about that. Right, if we break apart sectors, again, just kind of interesting to notice what is going on here. So first of all, S&P sold off from the open. Throughout this, again, this is where we closed, but this is what we did. Dow, I mentioned. Small caps ended up 37 basis points, and then you kind of it was actually a little bit more risk off than you might have thought. The bonds were strong all day long today. They finished up almost 1% on the day, which is pretty strong. Gold actually managed to go up from the open. And like I said, the VIX finished in the green, right? So I wanted to just, before I go into sectors, I did structure an IWM trade today. It hasn't fully triggered, I would say. Well, it is above my level, which is 159. That's the top of value, but it really needs to get, I think, a little bit further. So I put on a small trade, a small call spread, in case this is the one that leads. I think remember last week, small caps actually lagged large caps, but take a look at this, right? I do think they're setting up for a big move. Now we don't know until it really kind of gets above 160 if this is going to be the outperformer. It could slip into value and break, and then of course you have all these version point of controls down here. But I think for now, as long as it stays above 159, I'll be on the bullish side. But again, look how slim this value area is. Usually that means a pretty decent move is coming in one way or another. Right now it's leaning to the upside, but that could change. We've seen sometimes things do false breakdowns. Could be a false breakout as well. We don't know yet, a little bit too early, but I've got a small position on and playing the direction that it's leaning right now. So that I think is kind of most interesting. I think I may have mentioned that in yesterday's video too, that I was looking at the small caps. But you could see in terms of market breadth, right? Biotech, huge day, up 2.6%. Again, this is something that I've been talking about for a while. I was talking about how strong I was on. I had a CNBC video last week where I was talking about how strong the healthcare biotech managed care group is, and sure enough, this XBI, really nice looking, and it does have on the 1 hour a version point of control up here, but this looks great, and it's nice to see this group participating. Right, this has not been one of the market leaders this year. Small cap biotech, IBB. Also kind of a little bit of a catch-up trade, and you can see my XLV trade, breaking out to new highs, which I think it did touch. Yeah, well, it closed new close of all-time high in healthcare, which again has everything in it. Right, it's got a little bit of biotech, a little bit of healthcare, pharma, and managed care names as well. So really nice to see that. But besides that, software had a little bit of a follow-through move. Of course, by IBB also up here, larger cap biotech. Software did end up 1.1% on the day, so that continues to show some relative strength right now. But you could see there wasn't much. There was, in terms of sectors that are in the middle, you got some sectors, but a lot more sectors actually were down. Energy continues to melt down. The relative weakness. This is almost back at 52-week lows. The XOP, been saying for a while. I mean, it got pretty interesting when this thing started to rally a little bit. But again, it's making lower highs. Lower high here, lower high here, lower high here, lower high here, and we're just about back to 52-week lows again. But really, really weak performance once again. And I've got 3 of these ETFs in here. XOP, XLE, OIH, so that's kind of skewing, how many sectors that are in the red here because three of them are basically the same. But Chinese internets sold off throughout the session, down 1.3% through the day to close fractionally lower. They did open up in the green. Aerospace or defense and aerospace was also down. There was a negative Boeing headline earlier. The semis actually cooled a little bit. Besides AMD, I mean AMD has just been absolutely out of control. Talk about option activity. There was just a ton of weekly options that went up today. This is super overbought at this point. But very interesting. I did not play this one today. A couple of traders played it in the room. Congratulations, was up 3.5% today. AMD, can goes on these runs. It's pretty amazing. What else? Was there anything else I wanted to highlight in here? Consumer discretionary also weak on the day. Fang stocks, Facebook was your outperformer there. I still think Facebook can possibly take out these Virgin point of controls. There's one up here. There's also one on the hourly. I'm still long a couple calls. I tried playing this today. Had limited success with it, but that's fine. But I do see those two Virgin point of controls that are up there. A few other names. I look at Snap. We saw a bunch of Snap calls yesterday, and this does not look bad. There isn't a VPOC on the 1 hour up until 17. So remember 17. Also, there's a version point of control up here at 1650, and notice that this thing is now out of value, right, and above the 50-day moving average. So I would look for a little bit of continuation. Nice looking bar here off the bottom of value, and yeah, I mean that would be a nice percentage gain. That's almost 10 or right around 10%. Above it would be your version point of control on the daily. Shop gave back some gains yesterday, so that's why I locked up some gains. I talked about that yesterday. AYX had a huge day. We've talked about that name a couple times. Okta had a big day, up 4%. So again, I mentioned software. ServiceNow was the notice how it didn't change much during the day. ServiceNow, huge play for me yesterday. I got a little bit lucky with them being announced that they were being added to the S&P 500. But sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of luck on your side. And then MasterCard and Visa, which I mentioned too. Banks have been a little bit quiet lately. Here's my trades for the day. I'll talk a little bit about some of the option activity, but here's my service now. Nice one in this one. So Chewy, I jumped into this one. We saw a whole bunch of calls at the end of the day. I managed to take some of that trade off. Where is it? Yeah, I hit my first target, $23. Paid 22. So nice little day trade in there. Peloton, that was left over from yesterday. Luckily, this thing sold off, so I got out of this right on the opening. Again, some of these things, just like with Chewy, I don't want to stay. I'm not going to live in that trade. This actually ended up down. Peloton down 3%. So again, started off the right way, and I don't want to be super greedy with these things. Same thing with this Chewy. I'm not going to be in this for more than a couple days. See if it maybe can bounce up to 24.58. That's where I would probably be out of this trade. But again, you have to be really quick with some of these things. There's Facebook. There's my MasterCard trade. Plan, which reports earnings. I think it's tomorrow after the close. LH was a nice little trade for me. This was not a huge trade, but I just kind of see this was a nice trade for me last week, and then it gave back almost all the gains, or it did give back all the gains yesterday. Notice how I used the version point of control yesterday. It took one of these out, and then I decided to put a trade on towards the end of the day yesterday, and this worked, and I'm out of this one. So again, these are the opportunities where I've been talking about where you can kind of find some things, and you don't have to keep them on. You could keep them on for an overnight trade or a day trade, and be out of it. All right, so that's it I think for today. Oh, option activity. CGNX was an interesting trade. They went after February. That was a longer term trade. I mentioned there was some Visa that went up. Triple C saw some calls, but again, it's pretty active all in all. FSCT, saw some calls. Faux, not a name that I'm familiar with, but December 12.5 calls. And sometimes I put the description in there. Looks like they did buy some urban puts, which is down after hours. So it looks like they were right with that one. But yeah, you could see the amount of activity. CWH, by the way, which I'm long. Where did CWH end on the day? I'm long some shares in this one. Moving in the right direction, right above the 200-day moving average. So hanging out, breaking the downtrend so far above the 200-day moving average. That was actually the first trade that we saw of the day. All right, guys. So that's it. There's a few other ones in there, but again, all in all, it seems like there's more. There's some fresh call buying. It seems every day. All right, guys. Have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.